Welcome to Clutch or Kick episode 12, everybody. And we got some news, some oversight changes, some managerial changes. Josh thinks he's making decisions around here. No more. It's all me. I'm going to be making a lot of decisions. The context. What were you going to say,
This
Matt?
is going to go to shit real quick.
Yeah, probably. But some news for you all as well. The Clutch or Kick podcast will be moving next week. So this episode is going to be on the Plat Chat YouTube. You should be watching right now on Plat Chat. If you don't know that you're on the Plat Chat YouTube, get some help. Outside of that, we're going to be moving to a completely new channel.
The podcast you're watching is on the
get
channel you're currently watching it on.
Yeah, you might not know that you are blind legally. Get some help if you can't read.
If you didn't know where you're actually
here's the
watching
thing,
this content.
You're blind or you're two, right? Because you can't read. Those are the only ways you wouldn't know you're on the Plat Chat channel.
Yeah.
In which case, get some help.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So anyway, next episode is going to be on a new channel, and we're going to be pumping out more consistent Valorant content. We figured we'd make a new home for the Clutch or Kick channel, and also we're going to not call it Clutch or Kick anymore because it's terrible for search engine optimization, and instead we're just going to call it Plat Chat Valorant. Yeah. So there you go.
This is a way we can harvest you Timmies through the YouTube algorithm.
Yes.
And get you in here and just
and also
hit you with ads.
You know what I know about fans, Matt? They love being called Timmy's ripe for harvest. But the idea of being harvested, man.
But also there is
the Timmies.
A small subsection of our audience that might actually be 10 years of age because they just dislike the premiere of every Clutch or Kick episode, which is perfectly fine. You can keep doing that.
Okay.
What was that, Matt?
No, it's okay. I said it's okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They can keep doing that. It helps us with the engagements anyway. You know, just likes, dislikes, subscribes, unsubscribes, whatever it might be. I don't really know how the algorithm works.
I don't think unsubscribes help with anything.
Yeah, don't unsubscribe.
I think you could do every one of those but unsubscribe. I think I would. I would probably err you in the hush to do that.
Let's get the episode started. Clutch or Kick episode 12. We're going to kick things off right away with the new patch notes that got released. Patch 1.09. Mendo had a personal insight into this one, and he was really the driving force behind this patch. Funnily enough, because it's the long-awaited operator nerf patch that we have here. But they made a whole bunch of changes across the board. It's one of the biggest patches we've seen yet, and it's pretty interesting. Forced name change for IDs violating the code of conduct is the biggest takeaway from this patch.
Yeah, biggest takeaway.
No,
now it's everything that'll actually affect the game.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yo, bless you.
I'm good.
What have you done?
I accidentally swallowed saliva. It went down to my lungs.
Isn't that just like...
I'll take it from here. So anyway, about the ID change. So what did they?
Why don't we start from the top?
Struggling to breathe on this episode.
Let's start from the top here. Go not from the whole episode. Start from the first goddamn patch now.
Restart again.
No. Agent updates. Number one. What is the top one? It is Omen, the paranoia.
Yeah.
Updated projectile visual effects to better represent the hits, the hitbox. You like this?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I remember, Josh, when we were watching one of the Brazilian games last week. There was a moment where one of the Omens paranoid, and as soon as he did that, we both were like, that is such a strong goddamn ability. It's so broken. I remember in that specific, what I was going to say, in that specific instance, what I remember about it was, it looked like it was nowhere near the player that it was about to hit, and they just got full blinded. I mean, obviously, paranoia is an incredibly strong ability, and it's the reason that Omen is actually used primarily over Brimstone now. So I think that this was actually an issue. So nice.
Yeah, I also think they're going to need to tone it down in the future as well. Yep. I think no one's talking about Omen particularly, but he's one of the most, he's in every team composition purely because he has this undodgeable flash that goes through walls and blinds people. It's the most powerful flash that's in the game at the moment.
Wait, what about combat stim? That should make Grim competitive.
Well, we're going to get to that later.
Big buff.
We're going to get to that later, aren't we? Because,
Will Brimstone be in the meta with this combat stim change?
Who knows? Word on the street is we're getting Hiko on the show to talk it through.
Yeah, this is quality of life stuff, I think, too. Just from playing the game a ton. Sometimes you see a paranoia coming towards you and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm definitely out of the line of where it's traveling, and then you just get hit by it and you're like, what is the radius of this thing? It's like the whole choke. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, good change. What's the next change that we got? Yeah, just keep them coming, Kurt. Keep
Jet.
flying through them, dog.
Jet's blade
Oh yeah,
storm.
the jet nerf. The jet right click.
Okay,
nerf.
yeah, the jet right click nerf. So this is because statistically they were looking and observing at a lot of the kills with the burst fire from the blade storm and seeing that they were getting kills at a large distance away. For me personally, bro, this is already a wildly inconsistent ability that, in my opinion, in ranked. And
I think you miss regularly.
I don't miss, bro. I 0.25 my own clips. I'm going Kefri on that shit. I'm going through the clips frame by frame by frame. I get cheated on a regular basis whenever I play Jet. That's not even. I'm not joking. This isn't funny. This isn't a bit.
This should be better for you then, actually.
Yeah.
Why?
Because you are more incentivized to only use it at a very close range. So your brain.
I'm only
is
ever
now gonna
using it
say-
at a close range.
I mean,
Bro, I
maybe
can give you
should
some
use it
clips
even
that would
closer.
literally ruin Valorant. They would just take it off the App Store, wherever the fuck it is. I don't know. They would remove it. They remove it.
No,
the mobile link.
off the App Store.
Bro, they take it out. Oh, yes, we got the, okay. This video.
Yes.
Thank God.
This
we
video actually isn't that great because just this specific one, like for example, this change where they made the Empress shoot a little slower, like no one gives a fuck about it using it with the Odin. The important thing is trying to control your spray when you're using a rifle.
Yeah.
So this is just, and the same happens with the AWP as well. They just show people running at full speed with the AWP. Like that's never how you're going to use the AWP. So I don't know, man. But it's I've played a bunch of the game to try and get a feel for these changes, and they're quite interesting.
Viper, what the heck did they do? They gave her 100 things at the start.
Yeah.
Oh, her molly now it makes people vulnerable 2 seconds after they're out of it.
They are doing whatever they can to make Viper playable. I mean, this is a look at it just kind of run with her goo.
Transfers into Usain Bolt when she uses the ult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So she starts the round now with the 100 fuel. So a lot of the because they made the change, I think it was 1.08 where they allowed her to put the walls down before the rounds began, but you didn't have the fuel to keep the wall up for any meaningful amount of time to like push behind.
Let me riddle you this then. Instead of going through
opportunity to go fast,
instead of going through all these changes, at what point do we just say, all right, time for a rework?
I think they should have done that already. In fact, I would have loved it if they did that like a long time ago. Viper is bad because she puts down her utility at the beginning of the round or at some point during the round, and she can't pick the bad boys back up again. She doesn't have anywhere near the flexibility of the other smokers, and also she has to stay alive in order for the smokes to stay up. It's just like a 1-2 combo of shitness that means you have to play like a lurker in like an utterly unflexible position. It's her core design that makes her bad, not how much damage she does with her snake bite. They're just gonna slowly buff this agent until some aspect of her kit is broken, but she's still fundamentally strategically bad. It's the only agent in the game where they have completely missed the mark in terms of what makes her good or not.
She doesn't fit any like niche really, like at all.
Well, you would like, replace her with like a smoker, right? I suppose. But that's one of my biggest issues with Viper is that I often feel hindered by having a Viper on my team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she's. This is. I swear, every time we've talked about the latest Viper change, it always just comes back to what in a good comp are you taking out to have a Viper?
Yeah.
There's an Omen? I mean, are you kidding me?
Look at the run speed. Look at the run speed.
Well, maybe now.
Why
Look
would
how
they
fast
not
she's going?
Like with like what's kind of like her de facto smoke? Like if it was something where you could have like maybe 2 charges and you can pick them up or something along those lines, like you still have to throw them, which is a bit of an annoyance, but people would like get lineups. Like if you had that plus
Killjoy can literally suck her turret back into whatever pocket she's got from the other side of the map just by holding E. Like how can Viper not recall her smoke or recall her wall? Right. If these other people are just sucking abilities from all over the place.
If she could recall her smoke plus the wall that she has, because the wall is actually like a considerably like long distance, right? It's not like Phoenix wall where it's kind of short. Like maybe she becomes like reasonable, but
I don't know. I think she might need a rework, to be honest. Like her entire kit is quite clunky to use. I love the concept. I love the concept, the theme behind this agent. Sorry, I just it's too clunky.
You know what I would assume? I would assume is that she was one of the first agents they made, because you kind of look at her kit and then everybody else's kit after that, and this is so far behind in terms of like where the game is and where it seems to be going that like you kind of compare her to like even the other smokers, right? Like we kind of meme about Brimstone, but like, you compare her to Omen. Like Omen can throw 2 smokes from anywhere on the map. He can teleport. He can flash through a wall, and then his ultimate lets him go anywhere on the map, get information, then cancel it and go back. Yeah. Like this seems like it was just a character that was designed like initially with like this kind of, I almost say like standard like kit, right? She's got a wall, she's got a throwable smoke, she's got like a molly, like kind of your standards of like what you would have had, and then like an ultimate that just kind of like puts a bunch of gas everywhere, where it feels like everything else is kind of past her, almost like Soldier 76 at Overwatch, right? Like everybody else is kind of past him in the same type of role.
I would compare Soldier 76 in Overwatch to Brimstone, because Brim is very much like, it's like the CS thing of throwing smokes, except you click exactly on the map where they happen. It's the CS thing of having a Molotov, except it's just a perfect circle with no randomness. It seems like they just took like some of the basic stuff and
but
he's still good.
It's got to be the fact that like her smoke is like just effectively like one charge. She needs the fuel for it, can't pick it back up, like.
All right, how about this?
It's also, I think the key point that Josh made, if you're discussing those 2 agents specifically, it's that Brimstone puts his smokes down to an execute, and then he can go in for a trade off the entry. Yeah. But if Viper dies at any point, everything she just did in that round is now useless.
Just blows up.
She's value over time, a bit like Cypher, but you just can't have your smoker be that kind of agent at the same time. Also, she suffers massively from Sova being in the game. If Sova was not an agent, Viper would actually see some playtime, I think. Yeah. Which is why, there's an argument for hero bans. I was going back and forth with the guy on Reddit a couple of days ago.
Agent bans. I got to get this ingrained in your head.
Agents. But the biggest thing that I think agent bans would do is open up more niche hit picks like Viper, because she at the moment is probably the only agent in the game that has a hard counter.
I just suffer to feel like where she fit in, because you look like Brim and Omen. There's obviously like a choice between like smokes, like the duelists all have kind of like similar type stuff.
Here's what I think they should do. I think you rework her into a duelist. I think you take away the smoke aspect. Hear me out. I'm putting on my game designer hat. You can call me out whether or not this is bullshit, all right? But Ultimate, imagine she
Are you scrapping all of her abilities to start?
Yeah, I'm not even gonna get into her abilities. But here's how I picture the agent: as like a duelist, but like almost like a debuffer and buffer of your team against the enemy team. So you cast your ultimate. It spreads like shin height gas all over the place. Okay, so you know the ultimate's up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You follow me so far. Yep.
Yes.
And when your allies are walking through it, they get buffed. They get like a speed buff, and maybe like a damage buff, and they go like rabid. You know what I mean? Like the fucking zombies from Call of Duty. They start going. Like they start going crazy.
What would you do to this game?
And your enemies get not slowed down, because I hate slow mechanics, but I think your enemies would just be shit scared, to be honest, with the concept.
I would not want
of your team getting buffed up.
I would not want to see her go the direction of a duelist. I think put her more in the direction, because I think there's other duelists that they probably like have in the works or are gonna like actually release that have proper kits done already, instead of just trying to come up with one. I think she fits way more in the Cypher Killjoy type of area than like a duelist. I'm trying to think of like any other type of like agent you would want. Like it would take a massive do-over to turn her into somebody who kind of like gathered information like a Sova, like where I don't even know if like the idea of like her name even being Viper would make sense after that. Like,
dude, I just thought of a buff for the ultimate. When it's out, the enemies periodically cough, so they give away their positions.
Like something
I have
from
an
Metal
idea.
Gear Solid.
I have an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
So what if for the Viper ult, to give away the positions of the enemies, they had a red outline? Anyone? What about that?
Well, no, but like,
idea.
but the idea behind the ultimate is
why don't we give her an attack dog?
the idea of the ultimate would be it spreads over a very large area of the map, so you cover a lot more. And if somebody's trying to
Hiding around the corner, they go,
trying to hold on site, they cough.
right?
Okay, so it'll extend everywhere.
Yeah, it'll
go into
extend
their
like most
spawn.
places. Your team
Okay.
gets buffed. Like that would be Viper as a genuine duelist.
When you're looking
because-
down smoke, you have to hold your breath like the old COD games. Or like, but then you're more likely to cough. And when you cough, your aim shakes.
Yeah.
Is anyone else?
yeah.
Is anyone else kind of scared that like they may not do a rework and just kind of continue going down this path of just buffing her until
Josh was
she's
saying.
playable?
What Josh was saying.
And
That's,
then and then I guess the fear is that like she is super good, you need her, but she just kind of doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, like they could add like 2 walls at some point where you can just put like a
Could you
wall on both
imagine?
sides. And then
So chaotic.
she's not a good agent. She doesn't really, but she's provides so much value that
Chaos.
you kind of have to run her. Yeah, like
Well,
I
how
don't
about
know.
this
It would
then?
be-
How about this as well? A lot of her kit is based on her staying alive, and it's like this idea of a permanent structure on the map, like her wall being placed. What if they made her wall a lot smaller in duration, but a lot more powerful, where you can, for your allies, you can temporarily see through it, like it's transparent.
Good Christ.
Too good.
What?
That would be
So
too
wait,
strong.
but
That
the
would be too
enemies-
strong.
It would be
See
very,
the
but
wall
it's
that
like
her
temporary.
teammates
It's like a
don't
one.
see?
It's like a one use ability per round. But it's like it takes away the concept of it being like kind of clunky, and you actually have to use it to initiate. And when a Viper does that, you know that their team is either going to be executing onto a specific site, or I mean, it could be a fake, obviously. But like, I'm trying to think of ways to fix this kind of clunkiness that's inherently in this agent.
Oh, I think it's a difficult problem, right? Like it is quite a difficult problem because
Riot,
the way that
Miami.
they've designed it. I think it's also possible that if the meta changes significantly, so that agents like Cypher and Killjoy aren't really being played, so that you can free up that slot of the passive lurking kind of role going over to the Viper. Like they would have to nerf the crap out of a bunch of different agents that get value over time, but there just isn't enough room for everyone to be staying alive in the round and playing passively.
I think
I was about to suggest something that would be so broken.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
go on.
I've already suggested some absolutely batshit
actually,
stuff.
it's not
I
even.
don't hate the
yeah,
gas cough.
It's not even as dumb
I
as
don't
like
hate
what
it.
Bren said. Like fuck it. Like I may as well just entertain it now. What's the there? So there's a champion. I think it's is it? Yeah, it's in League. Where you can kind of pick an opponent on the other team that you are like actively hunting.
Yeah, I think they might have a couple like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, they do have a few. That's why I'm like, all right, like maybe they kind of go that way. Where like she could pick somebody on the other team that she's actively hunting and maybe get a economy bonus for killing them.
Yeah.
Now that kind of like changes the whole economy of it, but it also kind of entertains this weird mind game of like if you know one player is playing on a specific site, you can like mark them to be hunted,
Mate,
and
that
then
is-
like the other
That
team
is,
would
you're right.
think
That is
they're
absolutely batshit.
moving. Yeah, it is absolutely bad shit. Yeah.
It is, but I like it. It's so,
Why is the enabler, bro?
It would be
I
an
like it.
interesting thing to entertain, because I
Yeah.
think there's a
It would
lot of like
enable,
mental
man.
play that you could add to it. Like
I think that would actually add a really interesting dynamic. And it's not, I mean, it's clearly not a overpower. I mean, it's not broken.
she still
Yeah.
needs to get the kills, right? A lot like how Reyna does.
Yeah, I think that would
What-
add
what
a
else?
very interesting dynamic.
Let's move on. What else is in this
I'm
patch
with it.
here? We've been stuck on Viper for so long that
And
I'm
we'll give
like,
her a dog.
We'll
Yeah.
give her a dog as well.
we'll give her a dog. Reyna.
Give
So they,
Viper a dog.
okay, this was the change to basically the justification was for it that to keep the muscle memory consistent. I actually like this change. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
One of the worst things about playing Reyna was that I had to. You had to play so much Reyna with the ult on to essentially build the muscle memory for sprays,
Yeah.
which is what you want to take advantage of. And I just couldn't do it. I stopped playing Reyna because of this reason. I mean, this video, like you said, Josh, is not a great indication of it. They're just using it to show how quickly the
speed
bullets get
difference?
depleted on the Odin.
It's not. So the way that you would try and showcase this, and if you want to test it out in game, is that previously when you were trying to spray with a rifle, you can see by watching someone like Scream actually, because he always goes for headshots. But if you miss that first headshot, the Reyna bullets came out so fast that you just instantly you're in recoil and you're firing way above their head. Yeah. And it's hard to drag down at the same. You need to drag down much faster than you would do normally to counteract the recoil. So Scream would literally never use ult. Like the amount of times that Scream uses Empress, very, very small amounts. There are some other Reynas, but it's not an agent that gets picked very much anyway. So I think generally speaking, this is a good change. It's actually maybe a bit of a buff, even though it's a decrease in a firing rate.
Yeah, it's definitely a buff.
Yeah,
it's something that kind of needs to happen when they make the Brimstone change. Like even kind of looking over at myself the other day, I was like, it's kind of odd that they have multiple varying different fire rate ability, like buff abilities, where it's like you may as well just kind of like normalize it across the board.
Yeah, well, that's why they did, right?
Like,
in the rest of the patch.
As much as it's an adjustment to Reyna, I feel like this only comes because they buff Brimstone, right? And then you kind of like cut it like a little bit down from Reyna. Ground. Yeah, find a middle ground.
Can we take a look at the next patch note change here?
I assume this is the Brimstone one that comes next.
So this is, like you were just saying, Matt, they made it more consistent in line. This makes a lot of sense as well for their design philosophy. Some of the early talks that the devs were having was saying how when they design abilities, they often think about it in terms of the physics of the ability, like launching it. For example, a lot of the abilities have the same physics. So I think Brimstone Molly and Sage's Orb, I think, has similar physics. Might be... Yeah.
I think that's correct.
There's a lot of overlap when it comes to abilities and the way that they're cast, so you don't need to learn new physics for it.
Yeah.
So this is very similar in mind when it comes to that change. You're aligning the fire rate buffs or whatever, so that basically you're building muscle memory for if there is a fire rate steroid, for example, we'll just call it that, then this is how you're going to be aiming your gun from that one.
Does this
makes a lot of sense.
Does it make any effect of like whether they play Brimstone or not though?
I mean, you never picked Brimstone for the stim pack. I mean, apparently,
well, you would never pick Brimstone because he doesn't have a paranoia.
Yeah,
he doesn't have as many good abilities as Omen. That's really what it comes down to. Omen just has more good abilities.
Yeah, at the very, very top level, Angel still likes playing him because you can get 3 smokes down instantly and go for a super fast hit on a site.
Yeah,
in ranked, rarely makes a difference whether you spend 2 seconds setting up 2 different smokes with Omen or you do them instantly with Brim, because people just don't react that fast at most levels of rank.
You imagine,
but at the absolute top level of the game, I can still see an argument for running Brim sometimes.
Can you imagine if they let Omen put down 2 smokes at once? You may as well just delete Brim at that point.
Yeah. It's all about the paranoia, though. It really is. And I think if they just tweak paranoia so that it's much more of a skill shot, maybe reduce the width of it, I suppose. The breadth of it.
It was nerfed quite a bit.
Well, I think more than anything,
I think it still needs more.
I think what's frustrating about it is that if you're on the receiving end, you don't really have a way to get out of it.
Sure.
You can't.
There's no
it's not like a brief flash where you can turn around.
Whenever I get flashed by the Omen ult or the Omen paranoia, sometimes I feel like I have to play up close so that they're within blind range to stand a chance.
Yeah.
I'm incentivized to just.
There's a tiny bit of counterplay in that sense, I suppose, but not much.
I wonder if they made paranoia a channeling ability that they had to channel it for a little bit, almost like is it the fault line one from Breach, where where he kind of like you hold it down and you kind of see the line of the distance going like further out.
That's an interesting idea, because that wouldn't affect like set plays, where like the Omen hides in specific areas in order to get it like through walls onto people, but you couldn't just throw it out in the middle of a fight. I don't know whether
maybe there's some kind of like there's some kind of like audio like kind of call out like when they're kind of preparing it or something like that, right? So or like some kind of wind up time after.
Maybe if it catches an enemy, they cough as well.
Yeah, and then get attacked by a dog.
Maybe we'll add that in as well. Mate, if we were given the keys to the car that is valid,
he could be the attack dog.
Yeah. Go on, give us your best attack dog impression, Hugo.
He doesn't speak much.
Yeah, real good.
Yeah. What's the next change?
I think the next stuff is the op changes.
The weapon changes.
Look at this preamble from the devs, but like, please don't murder us.
I didn't. I'll read all that.
I read a decent amount of
I
it
ended
actually.
up reading it all.
I didn't read it. I just sent angry comments online to them.
Yeah, so a lot of their justification for what they made with the operators actually, well, I was going to say mirrors the CSGO devs when they made changes to the operator back in 2015, but in reality it doesn't because the CSGO devs never write anything ever. So that just didn't happen. They just made the changes. But the changes were for similar reasons in my mind, was that some teams were just incredibly dominant with operators. You remember back in my mind, I think back to when I was really watching a lot of CS, I was watching players like Kenny S just dominate using this one gun, using the op. And it's kind of in a similar position, or at least it was, and it might not be in the future, but they've made very similar changes. So basically, I think the fire rate has been decreased, so you can fire less repetitive shots one after the other. Your dead zone in terms of your movement, of when you're accurate, is changed as well. Hopefully the video doesn't really showcase
The video
this.
is so tragic.
ridiculous.
I mean, this is just a nonsense. I love these videos, but this was very poor.
Yeah, the fire rate change. Essentially, you can look at the numbers all you want, but this makes it so that you cannot play the operator as aggressively as you once have been able to. And you can there's still going to be characters that are more suited towards opping, like Jet. Like, it's still going to be quite powerful in their hands, but you're going to find a lot less of those moments. Like, we all remember those 4K, 5K clips that Wardell just pumps out for the engagements. Like, you're going to be probably seeing a lot less of those because it's not going to be feasible to get away with that. The biggest change, obviously, in this patch. What do you guys make of it?
It's
price,
huge.
It is a massive change.
It's an enormous change. And when I've tried playing some, I played a little bit of Unrated yesterday just to feel out the AWP a little bit as well. And it feels incredibly different. Like, all of your muscle memory, your timings, they're all going to be different. So people are going to have to start all the way back at like square one again in terms of learning those skills.
Yeah,
I like.
I was just going to say, sorry, to go back to your point about the with CS when that happened as well, when Kenny S was dominating at the time, and they did change the fire rate, but then also the movement speed when you were walking with the op. It was after that he just immediately fell off. There was a huge difference because speaking of the muscle memory and all that, it all goes away. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the immediate decrease in skill from the oppers, just even based on that.
Some of the stuff they mentioned in the long paragraph you didn't want to read through, I thought was actually really interesting when I kind of read through it yesterday. And it's a lot of the stuff that kind of I'm a little bit worried about, like with the nerfs, is that they basically were talking about how the operator serves a essential purpose to the game because it forces you to use utility, kind of work as a team, like kind of take over these sites, where if the operator didn't exist, like you could just kind of like flash in, play duelists, and just kind of like run all over the place.
Yeah, you absolutely could.
I like all of these changes. The one that I kind of am on the fence about is the price. The
price is enormous.
I think they probably could have gone somewhere about halfway between the 4,500 and the 5K. I think the 5K is it's almost like a deterrent to buy the weapon in itself. Like 5,000 is such an investment.
Yeah.
Like the idea behind it is so you can't get it early, which I get. But even if you got it early at the 4,500 price and it's not as good, and you lose it, it's still a huge loss, right? Like, I feel like the price is just
I
that's
quite
the
like
one
this,
that really
though.
bugs me out of it.
You like this, Bren?
Yes, yeah, and I'll explain why. Because I'm thinking purely from a gameplay standpoint. Their justification was that people were just full saving. They would win the initial round and they wouldn't buy anything to pump out the op in round 3.
In round
right?
3.
Which I don't think they want the game to be played that way. I think they want it to be kind of like almost a mid-half purchase, if that makes sense. Where if you're basically accruing up an advantage, you can purchase one. They don't want you to be able to just force one out and build a strategy around it. It seems like is the way they're wording it. But what I do like is that you can still do that, but you have to take enormous risks, and you're going to see those risks in overtime situations as well, because you only have $5,000 in overtime situations to work with. So if you want to buy an operator, no armor, no abilities, you are glass cannoning this. I think this is mental. And just picture this scenario right now: TSM Sentinels, grand finals of the First Strike event, or whatever the fuck it is, overtime scenario, map 1, Wardell purchases the operator. the crowd goes mild because there are no crowds. We're still in COVID measures. But
The crowd's like,
Dude,
what is that weapon? I haven't seen it all tournament.
that is I think there's an element of hype to it in knowing that this is an all-in strategy. And like the commentators are building it up. This is an all-in strategy from this player. Everything is revolving on this, and you instantly have a storyline in the game. Now, from a gameplay,
that was already happening with 4500. Like you couldn't buy armor with it anyway, really, because you still wanted the abilities instead of the armor. So if people were buying it in the OT, they were normally buying like an updraft of smoke and then the AWP to be able to play with. I don't. So what I really dislike about this change, Bren, is this whole 3-round thing. This whole idea of like the game, it should be like a mid-round purchase. I love the fact that it was predictable that teams that played around AWPing would have it for the 3rd round, because you plan your like anti-op strategies for the 3rd round in order to break their economy again. So it directs the right. If we say like one team is the rifle team and one team is the op team, the rifle team knows when the op team is going to buy it, and they know that they can do something that round in order to punish them. But now it's only going to be the team that's winning that can ever buy an op, because you're not going to be able to justify saving up enough money as you're losing to be able to purchase an op. So it's just a snowball mechanic now. You can't build any kind of opping style to your team. It's just a snowball mechanic.
This was never.
I think that sucks.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the biggest issue with the price is that it's not going to be available to the team that is behind. It is a snowball mechanic. The team that's behind, if they want to get the op on a player, it's just that much.
Is that how the money works out, though? Do we know that?
I don't know that for sure because I haven't gone through it. But you would almost certainly only be able to glass cannon in those rounds where you've built up enough money as a losing team. It's rare from just anecdotal experience, though. Like I say, I haven't run the numbers.
Sure.
That you are losing rounds on the losing side and you have built up enough money. Now, if like the first team gets the first 6 rounds and then you start to make a comeback of like the next 3, well, then you might be able to buy the op. But at that point, the only time when the losing team would be able to buy it is so late into the half, it probably isn't going to have an impact.
The things you brought up are applicable completely in pro play, right? Which so looking at this change, I think it's quite easy as well, and especially if you're a team that is completely revolved around the op, it's quite easy to be quite defensive when this change gets made, particularly on social media.
Did you see the coach of TSM?
Yeah,
Taylor.
Yeah, I did. I mean, we're going to get into this after this topic, but I just want to say that your mindset as well, Josh, because you watch so much Valorant as well, is purely thinking about this from the pro player standpoint, which is completely reasonable. But I think the devs made this change from a rank standpoint. First and foremost, because at the end of the day, the game live and dies off of the popular opinions of content creators, and a lot of them are very outspoken about the operator, and a lot of people in game hate the operator as well, because
that's true.
It was a very, very oppressive, and at the top level, what we saw in tournaments was the best teams could outplay the operator, even in its current state. They had strategies against it, like you were saying. In round 3, they would plan around the operator being in the field. But in ranked, that doesn't happen. So this seems like a change to me that they've made for the health of the general game.
But I think you could have tried. I think you personally could have tried these nerfs without the money increase, and then if it didn't make a difference,
it is quite heavy-handed.
The money increase.
It is
like
I
would have I think this may be a little bit heavy-handed, and I think they may have to walk back the money portion of it, because I think there is a realistic scenario where it is too risky all the time to buy, and it is too much of an investment. And then now, without the operator, the game changes like completely, right? Without it being in play, it just kind of becomes
already not been playing
a little bit
odder.
Yeah.
What also needs to be addressed is if people aren't opping on Jet. Let's say, what do we see ops on aside from Jet? We see it on Sova, right? Sova. Like Shadow on FPX, he'll be Breach and he'll be opping. Think about how much those players have to spend in a round on their armor and their utility.
Oh, yeah.
If you're an opping Sova, you're spending an additional 1,500 each round, hypothetically, to get armor, the drone, and your shock darts. Maybe you can skip the shock darts, but you need the owl drone, right?
Yeah.
So you're spending at least 1,300 to 1,500, plus then 5K. So if you're on the team that's behind or ahead, really, it doesn't matter which team.
Yeah.
You're spending potentially 6,500 to get an AWP on
It's
a Sova.
wild.
That's a crazy investment. That's so much.
I think
so.
Which
If, on Jet, maybe like you could skip out on a couple of the clouds or something. But even still, if you want to get it full with Jet, you're spending then
a lot of money.
700 to get all of your utility on top of armor and the AWP. So you're spending 6,700. And unlike CS:GO, this game has a money cap. I mean, CS:GO has a money cap, but it's way higher.
Yeah.
What is the money cap in CS? Is it like 16K
Yes.
or something?
Yes. So you can have 4 AWPs worth, damn near, right?
Yeah.
And in this game, you can have 4 AWPs,
Yeah.
or whatever, not 1.4, but
like
you know,
1.8.
Yeah, 1.8. I mean, sorry. So it's a massive difference. There's far different implications on the economy in this game, having the AWP that expensive.
I want to
Wyatt's
move the
example
conversation to
too.
talk about the teams, Matt, as well, about this
go.
op change,
Yeah.
because I think that's really where we're leading towards here, is what teams are going to be the biggest winners and losers of this patch here, mainly the operator change. Did we go over everything, Kurt? Did I miss anything in the patch?
You got pretty much everything. There's like a small change to competitive updates.
Oh, actually, there's some jumping accuracy changes as well.
Oh,
Yeah, we
all
didn't go over that with. I honestly, I was abusing the shit out of this in competitive, and I'm glad it's out because.
Wait, what did they change? Don't tell me they changed the jumping classic.
I mean, that needs to go. But they have not changed that. They've changed basically
Getting me to
people. The way they would do it is you would jump around a corner, and your accuracy from when you jumped around a corner and landed, your hitbox was just a mess. So basically, good luck headshotting you when you're leaping through the air, and it was so fast in terms of the speed that it would be very hard to win the gun duel if you were coming on the opposite side of this. But this basically puts an end to the jump shot, at least in my mind. When people do it, it takes quite a bit longer. Is that 2 seconds increased? Or
No. It's 0.025 seconds increased, but it does make somewhat of a difference because they've changed it from gradual to binary as well. So you are just fully inaccurate up until that time finishes. Whereas previously there was like a curve where you would get more and more accurate. So it does feel like a much larger change than the very small numbers would indicate.
And this affects like what Rays, like using the satchels to like just launch
not
yourself.
necessarily.
It's a huge raise nerf, I think.
Not necessarily, because so I play a lot of Rays, and often when I'm trying to go for a fast peek around corners, I'll just put a lateral satchel, and I won't lose any. I basically won't gain any sort of vertical height. I will just slide across the ground. I will always be touching the floor.
Or are you jumping?
I mean, if I'm double jumping in, I'm not getting a kill. It's literally to try and break.
When you put it laterally, you just kind of blowing it up, and just launching yourself like that, or are you like jumping during that animation?
I mean, you jump, but the way you put it is like 3/4 up towards your head, so that the momentum pushes you down and to the side, so that you're literally moving very quickly past their crosshair angle that they're holding. It is a big change to Rays. I'm not going to deny that, but when you are jumping in as Rays, you can. It's one of those things that you can practice so that you actually land on something as soon as you're going. Like a lot of the Brazilian Rays players are really good at that. But more often than not, if I'm double satchel jumping into a site, it's entirely on my team to follow up on the kills when they are just aiming at this flying squirrel coming into the site. Like that is, I'm trying to break their ankles in the same way that you would with a jet dash. But I actually, the way that I use the satchel personally, and the way that I think you should be using it to try and get those fast peaks around corners, you're not going to be gaining any vertical height. So this change shouldn't affect you as much. It could. I don't know how. I haven't tested it yet, but I don't think it should.
Yeah. That is basically the changes.
Okay, well let's talk about the teams then that are going to be affected most by this, because there's a lot to go over. Because there's a lot of teams that have built their legacy so far in Valorant based on how well they can use the operator. They've got these singular players. The teams that pop out in my mind immediately. What is the best way to do this? You want to go over region by region?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think just name a team and we'll talk about like how affected. Okay. I mean, the first one that everyone's going to name is TSM, right?
TSM,
I mean, well, I was going to say in NA, I think the obvious loser of this is TSM. I mean, they don't want to hear anyone on Earth tell them that, but it's the obvious narrative that will be created based on if you've ever watched them. And then I think the obvious winner is Sentinels.
Yep, 100%.
I think that's the obvious dynamic in NA right now.
teams, I mean, just to provide some wider context of this, any team that, generally speaking, will prefer rifling over the operator or doesn't build specific strategies around opping, you're going to see them just essentially be instantly buffed over this. In terms of the rankings of where you should be ranking these teams, they should be much higher up. And teams like TSM, which revolve so much around operator usage with Wardell, you're going to be looking at them probably sinking a couple of rankings, to be honest, until they get a grip on how to play around this meta.
The first TSM game is going to, like, after this change is going to be so interesting because we all know how people on the internet are.
You're not going to be able to do that.
If it happens, won't be able to do that. If it happens once, they will immediately just kind of jump all over it and run with it. Like, if they don't look the same after this, that'll be like kind of the whole story with this team, right? Like, it'll be like inescapable. Like, it'll be everywhere. Everyone will be talking about it. Like,
I want to set a narrative.
Time, though,
interesting how they respond.
It provides an opportunity for TSM to prove that they're not just a one-trick team, too.
Yeah.
Like, if they're able genuinely to come out of this, out of a Jet nerf in terms of the ultimate and an op nerf, the two things that everyone was saying would hurt TSM the most. If they come out of this and they're still a top 2 team, I would say, like, they don't even have to win things. They just still have to be a top 2 team.
Be in contention.
Then they have showcased an ability to adapt that a lot of people didn't think that they would have the ability to. Like, this is a growth opportunity for them.
I have a hot take here.
Okay. Here we go.
The recent tournaments, TSM have not looked that good. From what we've seen in the recent
tournament, they went out to Dignitas.
Yeah.
TSM have not looked good already when they were revolving around the op. They were quite one-dimensional in terms of their strats, that they were relying on the operator to try and get them a lot of wins, honestly. Like, a lot of their gameplay was relying on that. And I think people might attribute in the next tournament that's coming up, if TSM don't do well, they're definitely going to be blaming it probably on the operator change, and it will have some effect. But TSM, in my opinion, in my eyes, the TSM fans are going to hate to hear this, we're already on the downward spiral.
I agree.
I don't think you can really say that when their most recent tournament before they lost to Dignitas, they literally beat Sentinels. They were using like a bunch of actually interesting stuff where Hayes was picking up
Wyatt's about to drop 16 bars.
I'm about
the smokers and stuff
go off. No, but I do think what's been interesting about TSM for me so far is that obviously they won the first big tournament, the T1 Nerd Street, months ago. The first 50K. They won that. They dominated. They crushed T1 in the final. Wardell looked insane. Drone looked insane. That was when he was still playing Phoenix all the time. And then immediately after that, they had a string of semifinal or quarterfinal exits. They lost to Cloud9 a couple times, couldn't beat Sentinels. And then they switched their comp around at that point. That's when they changed Sabrosa to going to Phoenix full-time and Drone being on Sova full-time. And that's when they started running that new same comp on every single map. And they changed to that comp because it allowed Wardell to be on Jet all the time. He was no longer switching to Sova, where by the stats, he was getting far less kills on Sova than he was on Jet. And he was still getting a lot of kills on Sova. His kills per round is still absurdly high, but it was like a full 0.1 less than his Jet. His Jet was 0.99, his Sova is 0.89. Yeah. So that's still very significant. He's still really good, but significant decrease in kills. So they changed their strat to put him on Jet full time. They're running the same comp on every map with a Phoenix on every map. And they won phase with that after that switch. And then they obviously went out in the groups in the following tournament to Dignitas, losing to them twice. And I was thinking that we were going to see the same pattern again that we saw after Nerd Street, where they're going to have a few bad tournaments in a row, and then they're going to have to make some major switches to actually adapt to the current meta. Because we haven't even seen them with like the buffed Breach meta yet. I don't know how they would have even filled any of that in, right?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I was under the impression that I think they were going to probably have a couple off tournaments again, and then maybe rebound with some type of composition or strategic switch like they did before. So I'm kind of on the same page with you.
I want to add some weight as well to this point that I'm making, because it's not just like, if you look at purely where the tournament standings were and they beat TSM or they beat Sentinels in a previous tournament, that wasn't just the only group stage after that they had a poor performance in, right? I think the tournament before they beat Sentinels, they also had a poor group stage performance.
They have had
No.
multiple. It was literally
before
that
they beat
tournament.
Sentinels.
Was it that tournament?
It was that
But they
tournament
actually
they did.
qualified and got better over the course of it.
Yes, and then they won. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so this has been a recurring issue for TSM. I mean, yeah, I suppose
Look at how Wardell
it
plays,
is.
though. I just want to point something out, Bren, before we go to the wider topic of this team. Wardell is not getting nerfed by this because it's an op nerf. Wardell is getting nerfed by this because it is a Wardell's playstyle specific nerf.
Yeah, it
like
is.
it does not
his
nerf
aggression.
people that just hold.
Look at his
angles.
aggression.
Yeah.
It nerfs people that go for shit like this. And it's so unfortunate, actually. And I can see why Taylor, the TSM coach, and why Waddell was liking the tweet as well, saying that these are bad changes and they should talk to people who actually play the game at a high level, because this is a nerf for people who are incredibly skilled at the op. This isn't a nerf for people who just hold angles. This is a nerf for people who re-peak angles, who play aggressively, and who are able to hit their shots with consistency. So this must be so frustrating. I know why you're comparing it to like the Kenny S drop off in CS as well, because he played that same, aggressive style and then never looked the same again after that nerf came through. And I in some sense, I did think that it was very one-dimensional and kind of busted that Wardell could do this kind of stuff, but it was something special. And
it's incredible to watch.
If all of the opening now is just, I hold angle with $5,000 weapon, that's you're missing some magic here, because this really was magic.
Or even worse, it just kind of disappears, right?
No, that won't happen.
And we're just setting a rifle.
I don't think it'll disappear. I think that's too far. Well, if it does temporarily, it's because of the cost. And then I agree with you, Matt, that I think they might roll the costs back at some point, because we still see in CSGO, if we're using that as a comparison, which it is a great one because they did have to nerf it early into the game's life in a similar way. People still play the op very aggressively. I mean, if you watch what Simple is able to do now in CS, I mean, you can still do incredible shit with it. So, and I mean, obviously, Wardell is just on a different level of skill with it. He will still find ways to be unreal with the op. It's going to happen. It's just you can't do it with the exact same frequency.
Yeah. And I think, probably one of the major takeaways that you would get from this, if you're a TSM fan, is like, woe is us, this is going to be a bad change. But this is a proving grounds, as we were saying, for TSM now to prove that they can not rely on the operator and still be a top team. So I mean, no one here wants to see TSM falter and fail at this hurdle. Everybody wants to see them. Yeah, everyone wants to see them continue to dominate in NA and actually continue this rivalry against Sentinels. So that's an interesting one. A team that we also need to talk about, though, the counterpoint to TSM, the one team that is going to be improved is Sentinels in NA. Sentinels have always kind of preferred rifling, this rifle playstyle, and they're I like to make comparisons of them to Liquid, but I think Sentinels in a lot of ways are a little bit more disciplined than Liquid as well. Or they play a little bit less fast and loose in gunfights.
Less fast and loose? I think they play way more fast and loose, Sentinels.
You think so?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They play way more high tempo, busting into places. Liquid are really like methodical, playing contact all across the map. Yeah, I absolutely think so. Shazam also does like to op on attack. So I don't think this is just like a slam dunk improvement for Sentinels. It does kind of hit Shazam a little bit.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk improvement, but this is going to change nothing for them. This is definitely not.
I think they're going to play as
this is why Sentinels are so good. They're so dynamic in terms of the agents they play, the guns they use. They're just the most dynamic NA team, and that's why they're going to survive patches like this and other new things that they add.
Yeah, that's another great point as well, isn't it? That these kind of patches are gonna be thick and fast. Like there haven't even been any major tournaments between the Sage nerf that completely shook up the meta, the Breach buff that completely shook up the meta, and now the Operator change that completely shook up the meta. And these are all happening within a month.
Can I also remind you that how many days are we towards the end of the I guess like kind of the series where we get another agent? We're super close to that.
New agents getting introduced.
We're like what, a week or two away from that. Like this is like right before a tournament, like first strike. Like, this is like actually just mind blowing, like the amount of change. Where I was actually interested in we won't know because we won't see them for a while, or even they don't have the full team announced yet. But a team like 100 Thieves who have had the experience of going through the operator nerfs in a game like the op nerfs in a game like Counter-Strike, right? Like they haven't exactly settled on a playstyle yet because we have not seen them yet. So they're just kind of in the lab cooking up what they
100 Thieves are the
deem
one
is
team that I think
best out of
100%
this.
are going to be coming out of this stronger, though. Assuming that
Yeah.
have Dicey and Asuna, is this still a rumor?
I don't think it's gone anywhere further. I'm not even sure whether there have been anything else. There's been anything else to substantiate it. You know, it's the kind of thing. It's the kind of rumor that we have no idea whether they were even. It was even happening. How far through the process it was. They might have turned back on it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's just needed a
pure
ringer the
speculation.
night someone got the screenshot of them gone.
Honestly,
I mean, we'll see what happens. You had a great team though that you mentioned the other day. We were talking about this in the kitchen.
T1, dude.
Yeah,
T1, I think, are going to be coming out so much stronger off the back of this. You think about a lot of their early problems that they had when Skadoodle's hero pool was pretty piss poor and he wasn't used to the opping style. If they can switch to full-on rifling, my God, T1 should be looking like the team that was promised in the early power rankings, dog. I'm telling you,
they had a lot of issues.
I didn't know you were going to go that far.
Dude, I'm willing to go this far because
like I agreed with you in the kitchen, not now.
let me make my case for NA here. Let me make my simp NA case, okay? Because Lord knows a lot of our viewers don't watch the other regions and they only watch NA as well, so they're going to be agreeing with me. The point I want to make is that I think every other team now is going to be in an opportunity, or most teams at least, with the exception of some, are going to be focused entirely of like, how the fuck do we play around this change here? When, in my opinion, T1 the whole time should have been focusing around rifling a bit like Sentinels play, because that's where a lot of their key strengths lie. This, I think genuinely they could be a top 3 team quite easily.
I very much disagree with that, I think. Because not only did they suffer from this like lack of aggressive AWPing, but just a lack of aggression from any of their team. There's no one that likes to go aggressive other than Food, who would just jump in. And I mean, considering they've lost Food and Crashies was probably their best player, this team is obviously going to have to reboot. And, you know, maybe they bring back in Skadoodle because they can defensively op now, and that's like going to play into his style. But they still had so many issues with like the roles that these guys were going to play, who's actually playing aggro in these fights, and who's trying to stay alive in the rounds, because everyone seems to want to try and stay alive and play slow.
Dog, all I'm saying is
it just didn't work.
All I'm saying is clip this when T1 win the next tournament.
A lot of time has passed. And I do think that this is obviously it's hard to say exactly where T1 will end up because we don't actually know who the last 2 players are, even though one of them probably going to be dazed. We don't know who the other one is yet, so it's hard to say exactly where they would end up. What the hell was I talking about? So it's hard to say exactly where they would end up, but I do think that they are a team that should benefit from this patch a bit. I think it is a good patch for them in comparison to some of the other teams.
But consider the fact. So I don't want to just make these outlandish claims and not actually provide some sort of points to try and back it up as well, because this is exactly how you get into the shit list of everyone else who's in the scene. But the point I wanted to make is that I think this is a team that's already in the process of rebuilding, and what better time to do it when every other team is trying to get their shit together with these massive monumental changes.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I think that's a kind of, like with so much going on with the game in general, like in terms of agent changes, agent additions, the primary like weapon, like the kind of big game changing weapon going under huge adjustments and a money change, and the fact that there's no tournaments right now, so
new
like you're just kind of going off of,
in 2 weeks.
New agent potentially in 2 weeks, so you're just kind of going off of scrims, which is never really kind of great to go off of. Some of your teams that are forming or trying to figure out now almost get a little bit of a game reset. Like not a full game reset, right? Like obviously still there's going to be a ton that carries over, but they do get a chance to kind of catch up a little bit faster than if nothing would have changed.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if they can, if they get a good read on the meta. I mean, we talk about that all the time in Overwatch. It obviously applies less to a game like Valorant, but I think it still applies much more than a game like CS, where if you have a good read on which agents are really powerful right now and how to maximize the value of them, you can find a style that gels with your team and potentially accelerate that improvement way faster. We don't really know what these teams are cooking up in the lab, but it's all possible. It's just they're going to have a lot of competition. And the team have given no real like evidence at the moment that they're gonna be good.
At least we do know that before they were struggling to find a leader for that team, and that's one of the reasons why they brought EU up from the academy team, a rather fresh player. But getting an established leader in days, someone that they're already obviously friends with, have played with in the past, also sort of some similarities you could draw between him and Steele in terms of their leadership style, and I think that could possibly solve some of the problems they had in terms.
I wonder if they add Skadoodle back.
They are. That's pretty much been
is that
almost.
confirmed?
That has pretty much been almost all but confirmed. Yeah.
Oh right.
He's been playing with them for however long it's been now since they cut Crash Season 4.
I mean, that should be this change should be so much better for Skadoodle's playstyle.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely should. I mean, 100%. It mirrors a lot of what CS opping has been like for the past 5 years.
Yeah, and specifically his style as well, where he's like, safe with it.
Let's shift regions to EU and talk about some of these teams in EU that might be benefit from this. The number one thing that comes to my mind immediately, I'm a bit of a Liquid simp. I'm going with Liquid here. I think this everything about these changes just completely suits their play style, I think, and really
literally
it's just going to cement almost every single change that we're seeing here.
Yeah, because it gets faster.
I mean, even if Link wants to continue warping like he has been recently, Link was more of he did have some clutch moments and he was getting much more aggressive, but the way that they preferred to play it was that he would just hold an angle and the rest would like move forward and rifle with it, which is still a super viable way of being able to warp. Not going to be able to do the flashy shit, but it's not like they were doing that much of it anyway. So yeah, I think this is just a good buff for Liquid, especially when they're the kind of team that should have the base to be able to work like region and that kind of stuff too.
I'm just kind of angry that there's no games like that. Like we won't see any of this come to fruition probably till First Strike, because they just played it was they played like that show match, which
the
just
best in the West with 6v6 Jets.
It was just an absolute shit show, so you got absolutely nothing out of it. Where that would have been, well, it still was probably before this, but it still would have been cool to kind of see those teams go at it. Where now we're sitting here for probably close to a month with no real kind of tournament play.
It's just going to make it all the more sweeter when we actually finally do get some tournaments, though.
Well, it's all just going to occur all at one time, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're like the shittiest thing for some of these teams will be if they think they figured it out or they think they have a play style that works and they can play around it, and then we get to First Strike at that first qualifier and they are so far behind that there is not any time left there to make changes or catch up, right? Like you're already in the thick of the qualifiers.
I think we're all in agreement here that Liquid is going to be one of the rising teams, at least from these changes. Is there any teams that you think are going to be badly affected by this in Europe? Europe, to me, in my mind, is a much more well-rounded region when it comes to a lot of their strategies.
I mean, definitely the one that you would have to put up there as like at least a question is whether G2 and Mixwell are going to be able to do the same kind of stuff. Mixwell does use the jet almost exclusively. I mean, literally exclusively at the moment. And with the nerf to the op and the nerf to the jet ultimate, I think it's going to be very interesting to even pose the question, do they continue with Jet? Like, do they as a team believe that there's still enough value to be gained from Jet in terms of how she can dash engage into sites and set up a lot of their executes, in terms of the value she can get out of shotguns, and her ultimate's still going to be fairly decent. Like, are they still going to run with that? Because when Sage got nerfed, David P, I think, was put in a pretty tough position because that was the main agent that he played as well. He's a smart guy and he's been able to pick up Breach and he's been playing that pretty well, but he still runs the Sage on Ascent and still gets big value out of it there. So I think that they are a team that has got a very flexible style, but their team compositions that they've been using have not been that flexible. And so this is pushing them a little outside of their comfort zone, I think.
At a glance, though, I would make the claim, I've made a lot of claims this episode, but I would make the claim I think that they are probably going to be one of the safer teams, at least across the board, across all regions, when it comes to these changes. Yeah, Mixwell likes the Jet. Yes, they like to focus around the operators. What opinions do you guys hold about this? You agree with me here?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I do.
Yeah, I agree, and for more of for the reasons that Josh outlined, like they are very flexible in terms of, we've seen them be flexible in terms of everything outside of composition, but it's really just because the composition was working for them. Sure. I mean, we actually haven't seen them similar to TSM in a way, but obviously G2 with more success. We just haven't seen G2 have the need to switch. There's just been no reason really until the game devs force them to switch their comp. They're going to keep winning with it.
Yeah, and that's the other part to bring up about G2 as well, is that unlike TSM, where they've lost BO3s and stuff like that, and have been slow to make adjustments, G2 have never had to. And when you look back at the past of G2, all of their players have in the beta and like before they got picked up by G2 in the very early European times, been incredibly flexible players. Ardis was a Jet player who sometimes played Brimstone for Fish 123. Mixwell played a range of stuff, including Viper and all sorts of other picks when he was playing on Prodigy. Paditek was a Phoenix main who is now playing Omen. These guys have played it all in the past and have just been elite at whatever they've been playing. Like when they joined G2 and formed this G2 composition, they were off-rolling. That's what's really interesting, is that there's no real evidence for them being stuck in their ways, because we know that they were almost like changing in order to make G2 great.
Are there any teams in Europe that you guys think that we should be talking about in regards to these change in terms of being a bit of a powerhouse? Maybe they're just sneaking by the radar, because EU has been in flux. Liquid has been on the tail end of the top teams. It's always been G2, FPX that we're really talking about here. Are there any teams in your minds that might be positively affected by this outside of Liquid?
I think that the like more slower paced teams like FPX should be somewhat favored by this, because you're not going to get caught out as much when you're trying to set up your executes and your plans to be able to take map control. You're going to be able to take map control easier against an AWPer that isn't as likely to be able to really quickly peek aggressive angles. So I think that it's a small buff to these kind of teams that play a more strategic style, I think. There are some teams, though, in Europe that just have crazy AWPers. Like, not that I've watched very much of them, but CNED, the Turkish guy who's been playing for, what is it, Nolpenki. He's a very good AWPer. And I think that those kind of teams that rely on those big players to make those big moments happen are going to see a bit of a nerf.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it does matter, but in terms of the team rankings, and it does matter, but still
we need
in a small way. I was
just going to say.
And I feel similarly, actually, to just take it back to NA for a second. I forgot to mention them, but for all the reasons you just outlined of why you think it'll be a small buff for FPX, Josh, I feel the same way about Gen G in NA.
Gen G's biggest fan.
Just so hard right on the payroll.
Okay, let's talk about then instead, because I know a lot of us have been watching Brazil as a region. That's where all the tournaments have been recently. Brazil as a region is constantly in flux. Their top 8 is constantly taking wins against it, partly because the formats are also kind of a little bit wank, same as EU. There's just the best of ones.
I love the word wank.
They're wank.
It's true, though, because there's a tournament ongoing right now as we're recording this. I think it's the Evolution tournaments.
Yes, sure.
And it was just best of ones all throughout the tournament. Really bad for deciding who's going to be
the top
team.
In it right now?
There is the grand finals.
They're in the grand finals right now.
Right now, yeah. So we're not going to talk about that, but talking quite broadly about these changes for Brazil. Brazil has a whole mixture of teams. Some that really like rifling, some that really like jet operating, but all of them have something in common. Well, not all of them, but most of them play a very, very aggressive play style. This is what my personal theory is with this change, that how it's going to be affecting Brazil here. This is a region that we've been struggling to kind of filter out some top teams as who are like maybe the top 3 at a given time, really cement and lock in those roles. I think this is going to separate those teams, and you're now going to start to see maybe the tiers in Brazil as a region are probably going to be settling after these changes. What do you guys think?
I think it's still going to be.
You think it's still going to be bad shit?
Still going to be, yeah, I think it's still going to be
really
wild because it's just such aggressive rifling styles that they play. And also, well, there are some opping jets in Brazil that are dominant by using the mechanics that we just that just got nerfed, excuse me, like QCK on Team 1. He wins so many defensive rounds for his team just through sheer aggression, jump peeking, that type of shit, and he's not going to be able to do that anymore. What I like about Brazil and the way that they play Jet that other regions don't take as much advantage of is using her as an entry, and that's sort of similar way to Raze if you double satchel in. But the way that they use Jet to entry into sites is far more valuable than I think using her as more of a just in a static op role on attack. So I don't particularly think that it'll affect their jet play on attack. And I actually think that other regions should probably adapt that into their attack strategies because I think it's going to be good following this patch.
I was just going to say, with how almost like the entire region kind of plays and just how fast it is, like I almost feel like this is kind of where it'll head. Like in the other regions, like maybe not get this crazy, right? But like some of this will kind of seep into the other regions because they, like you mentioned, Wyatt, like they don't rely on a lot of like the movement opping abilities that some of the other regions do, where maybe we see some more type of play like we see in Brazil, in like your North Americas, your Europe.
Yeah, you totally could if teams still want to play the jet on defense. Like if they still value upping jet on defense with these up and jet changes, then the best way of playing her on attack is to play either like really set strats like Vision Strikers have, where you're pairing the breach flashes with the dash timings and it's all perfectly coordinated. But I don't think that NA really has that in them. Instead, I think they'll go the Brazilian route of just let's go dash in and try and engage faster.
But I wonder if NA has as much of that. I don't know I don't even know what you call that type of, insane aggression. Yeah, cocaine fueled aggression. I don't know what you call that type of aggression, but I don't even know if NA has that full willingness to all go in with not a moment's hesitation. Yeah. I don't know if NA has that.
Sometimes
I think you put it well on last week's episode, Wyatt, where you said that the Brazilians just play with zero fear. Like if they say go into the site, like they just go, right? Like they have no fear.
I love that play style. I think it makes a lot of sense. And if you get very good at this, you are going to I'm calling it now, the first international tournaments, you're going to see some major upsets just from it, because teams are not going to be able to play against that kind of tempo and pace.
We need a board of Bren's guarantees.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple, right?
I've got to revisit in like 3 months.
T1 are going to be a top 3 team, if not top 2. What was the other claims that I made today?
Did you just add on the top 2?
Yeah,
I think I said top 2 before.
You said top 3.
I just had a physical reaction, sort of as if like there was something like a lemon, just citrus in my mouth.
Well, here's the thing with NA is, who would you put in the top 5 of NA? I mean, it is all over the fucking place currently. Like, with this MDL shit and teams just literally benching all their players.
Like,
there's going to be more of that before the next tournament.
NA is in flux right now. Yeah. Like, I actually think my take is not that hot. I mean, it might be a little bit spicy, but it's not that hot.
I was looking up before when the end of the series, like the when you would expect like another agent, and that hits like October 13th. So like some of these first rank tournaments, I think in the other regions start like around like in the October like 20th like region, where maybe they'll remove the new agent for it. Maybe they'll.
The only reason they removed Killjoy was because there was some bug spots that she could play stuff in. So I think that is the only scenario in which they will stop an agent being played, because teams were scrimming with Killjoy even though she got banned in tournaments.
Yeah.
You're just setting up for a crazy month.
Let's shift the conversation along away from this, because I think we've kind of exhausted the major regions. I don't really want to go over Asia and Southeast Asia with these changes, because none of us are really watching enough to make good comments on it. So let's talk about the general news that's in the scene as well. There's a little bit to get through here. Gambit have finally entered the Valorant scene. They put up a full Russian CIS squadron, go on to CIS Massive. Yeah. And it's nice to see Gambit finally entering, actually. And CIS is a region as well. It's kind of one of those regions where you don't see too much sponsor teams, generally speaking. The money isn't quite as good there. So Gambit getting involved in this scene generally signifies to me that there is something on the line that is going to be worth fighting for now. And I'm not just talking Mulan songs. I'm talking the prize money, in First Strike.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. This team seems to have been specifically designed to win that bag in the Russia minor region of First Strike.
Hey, I'm all for it.
Yeah, there's also a bunch of other organizations. I think I saw the CEO of Evil Geniuses.
Yes, they are looking at picking up a team as well.
They're coming out to look for a Valorant team. It's Nicole. She said, anyone knows some... she was saying Rady and I ranked people for Valorant because they're looking for a team. So
it'll be me soon.
I think now... look, when you see... did you just say get me signed?
I said that's going to be me soon.
Yeah, you're playing too much Magic the Gathering to ever get good at Valorant.
Yeah, I actually haven't played Valorant in like 5 days.
If EG's signing any mythic
arena players, dog, that's me.
I think it's just because you see Riot getting directly involved now with First Strike. Like, obviously, they were involved in the initial series.
There's a lot of orgs, Matt. There's a lot of orgs that they were waiting for the sign to jump in. They're basically waiting for, because especially in COVID, for an organization to get involved in an esports scene, there has to be some sort of concrete knowledge behind the scenes that something big is happening, at least in terms of that is going to be making some sort of payoff for them. That it's worth jumping in at this point. And I mean, this all aligns with the First Strike events. This all aligns with the First Strike events. This is why you see all these orgs now suddenly wanting to make moves. And this is why earlier, in a lot of earlier episodes, we were talking about, here's Nicole, what she was saying about essentially just trying to recruit for a Valorant team. A lot of these orgs now are kind of rushing to get some sort of presence in line here for First Strike events, because I think this is really going to be where the turning point of the Valorant scene comes from, is this event. When you're talking about a history of Valorant, a lot of the early days probably going to be forgotten, a bit like how Overwatch is currently now. A lot of times you're only really thinking about,
these teams need to also get in from the standpoint of like if they wanted to get in, like if there was some kind of like let's say like how Flashpoint and Blast work for like CSGO, where there's like franchise leagues in those, right?
Yep.
You want to get involved in the game in that. Let's say if some other leagues kind of pop up like throughout the year that are more like a season based, that you need to have a roster on standby. Also, when you get involved with them, you have the ability to then go out and raise more money to do more stuff. So it gives them another vehicle in a world in which, Overwatch is in an off season, Call of Duty's in an off season, League of Legends is in like an off season or kind of wrapping up their season. Like, hey, what does your organization have going on towards the end of the year when everybody's putting their budgets together for next year and coming up with all the sponsor money that they can allocate? Hey, look, we're doing this big thing in Valorant. Like, it's a no-brainer, especially with the time period. When you're pitching sponsors and whatnot, it is like right now, like maybe even a little bit later, like Thanksgiving. So that all aligns. Like, let's say they pick up Valorant teams and the viewership's pretty good and like they're competitive. You can easily kind of rack in some sponsors and some more money going into the new year. So it makes sense for any organization who wasn't already in, who's sitting on the outside seeing where it's going. When this gets announced, and it gets announced that it's happening before the end of the year, that's also a massive point, right? It doesn't happen, into 21. It's going to be wrapped up by 2020. It's huge for a lot of these teams to be able to go out and get teams and then kind of get some sponsors and money off the back of it.
This is the gamble that orgs are taking, right? There was a lot of orgs that got in right at the beginning, and that risk is that if you pick up a strong roster that cements themselves as a top team, you have a top roster, maybe on the cheap, but it is a risk because you're getting in quite early. We saw some teams get involved around the time of I remember the Flashpoint event where you had Dignitas actually signing a team just for the Flashpoint event. Like, there's various points to get into a scene, but this seems to be the major turning point where almost every major player in esports in terms of orgs is wanting to get involved for this, which generally signifies that it's good. You know, you've got a strong scene. The gamble that's being taken here seems to be quite a promising one.
Unlike some of those early orgs, though, they like the new ones coming in, they don't have to kind of go all in and kind of shell out the amount of money that some of these other orgs have shelled out to get involved in the game, because once they are involved, like these orgs have such a great reputation in other games, orgs like, Gambit, Evil Geniuses, like NRG, right? That they will be able to go out and like, hey, we're in Valorant, this is our team, like we're going to be competitive. They'll be able to go out and find sponsors that eventually they will be able to bring in top players, right? And top players want to play for these types of like organizations that have like big or like long time standing within esports. So I think it's two really interesting different approaches that you could have taken to getting into the scene. I think you were almost better served to kind of sit around up until now, and then now, especially because things are open in qualifiers, you'll find a ton more players coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Sure.
Where you can build a roster that can be competitive, then go to another team after you got to get some sponsors and you have a little bit of a war chest of money, and then start to take some players, right? And build up a team that way. So I think we'll see a ton of roster movement as the scene grows, and I think like into like probably towards the end of the year, like after First Strike, you'll see tons of movement between organizations.
You guys want to add anything onto this?
Well, I also just wanted to point out how fast a team can just be cemented within the scene. Like people often comment about like, oh, you're late to the party or whatever, but people organizations and teams very quickly become staples in the scene. Like it feels like G2 have been around forever, but they really haven't. Like that team was not around in the beta. They haven't been dominating forever. What they've played coming up on 3 months now. They've been
Just
around
COVID,
since July. Yeah, I mean
COVID
does
makes it feel like
the time period for sure. But it's very, you very quickly become a household name within the scene this early on. So you don't really risk that much coming in late. You just need to have a decent performance in First Strike, go fairly deep, and people will take notice of you because they recognize your name.
I was just going to say, with the way the First Strike's built, you have a better than expected performance. You have a kind of big name behind you as like an organization, and somebody else falters that's like a big team, right? You'll be able to easily go to pick those players up, right? You'll be able to pitch them pretty easily. Like if you're a team that's not involved, I don't think right now, but like let's say like use like a Complexity for an example, like really good to play for. Everybody loves like Jason Lake. Like they get involved, they have a good run. Maybe a team at the top kind of falters a little bit. Hey, you want to come play for us? Like, look at this awesome facility we have. We can take it to the next level. Like they'll be able to make themselves big players in this rather quickly.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of those big players then, because we got some roster movements even happening right now. WeDid is being released, I think, from Mamba Mode Gaming. So WeDid released. I don't follow the sort of lower section of NA closely enough to understand this kind of justification, but maybe you guys can shed some light on this.
There was a twit longer that was associated with this because I think he's the CEO or maybe the founder or something. I don't know exactly what his position is. But the guy in charge of Mamba Mode Gaming released a tweet longer saying that they had released WeDid as a free agent so that he could pursue other opportunities in the scene. And they specifically added a paragraph below being like, there's no bad blood. We're just literally releasing him. We love him. We're hoping that he finds a new top team. Now, I assume that this is because some big tier 1 organization wants this guy who was probably the best player on Mamba Mode Gaming, was their Viper player, and was the main reason that everyone was like paying attention to them as well, because they were playing something totally different to everybody else. And there's a lot of tier 1 organizations that are trying to solidify their roster before First Strike. So in such a competitive environment where there's a lot of players trying to get into these slots, I assume that this is just a lovely gesture from the Mamba Mode Gaming CEO to release this guy instead of trying to bargain for a buyout for him, which is how a lot of these tier 2 orgs make their money.
Right, and he probably had a bunch of offers from other teams, or other bigger organizations, right? And yeah, I think like you said, I know Call of Duty, we've seen some nasty stuff where the owner of a team like this would just hold on to this player for some insane buyout that would probably fund their tier 2 organization for like 4 years. And
saw it with Messi.
Messi.
Yeah, saw it with Messi recently.
Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit different. That'd be like if I don't know, LeBron James just like was like, hey, could you just like let me go so I could go to this other team? Like the Lakers probably wouldn't be like, yeah, sure, here you go. Like, we love you. Thanks for being nice. Like, like fuck you, we're selling you for a ton of money.
Similar money involved as well.
Paid, like, athlete like right now, like
who?
Messi.
He's up there. I don't know. He's up there. I mean, like I said, not really.
Up there with the Valorant pros.
Yeah, up there with the Valorant pros to a degree, but a similar
WeDid
scenario.
and Messi.
Messi averages about making 600K a week.
How's his Viper gameplay?
650K
Yeah, right on
a
Viper.
That's crazy. Huh? That's like a Sinatra per week. That's wild.
Maybe Sentinels is funded by Messi, and we don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, I mean that's a very good point that you've put up though, Josh. In terms of like this is just this seems to be a very nice gesture. It's also very good that the org specified, nothing, no bad blood, nothing untoward, nothing to do with any of the recent tier 2. See, I don't know if we did actually play Kingdom CS.
Games he has in match fix.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a clean slate, and this is a thing that not a lot of orgs do. So this is quite a good opportunity for WeDid here.
This is like, if you read between the lines, this seems to indicate that WeDid is gonna join a tier 1 organization. Yeah. There's no other reason particularly that I can think of that you would release somebody as a free agent if they didn't already have an offer to join like a top team. Otherwise, you just keep them around, because Mambamo Gaming looked like they were actually getting through the tier 2 and starting to maybe get to a point where they could contest.
I mean, they were winning a lot of tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, but these are like low-level tournaments.
Sure,
like
but they would
complexity, renegades, this kind of tier 2.
So they established themselves as like the 9th best team in NA by winning that last Pulse Arena tournament where they just beat everybody in tier 2.
If you manage to get into the quarterfinals of the NA First Strike, that's actually a really big accomplishment. Yeah. So the fact that WeDid is leaving Mamba Mode, who have a good chance of getting to the quarterfinals and trying to go somewhere else, I'm assuming that this is going to be a big move. I'm assuming that this is like a 100 Thieves, a T1, a something, like some big organization. Yeah. Maybe not either of those two teams, because those have already had rumored players that they're picking up, but something of that kind of scale.
Could be, yeah. Could possibly be. Let's talk about EU instead, though. The Hungarian player, BZT, as he's known. He's come back to needmoreDM. I mean, it's... Yeah, an interesting change here, because I assumed that for the reasons we just talked about, I assumed BZT leaving was for him to join a top-tier team.
Well, he was trying to.
Okay, normally when players do that, they have something lined up, right? Because it's quite a big shift.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, maybe he just...
Well, sometimes, for example, was it CNED, I think? He left the full Turkish team because they were going to sign long-term contracts with their organization, and he didn't want to sign long-term contracts. Now, that doesn't really apply to needmoreDM, because they aren't signing a long-term contract with the well-known organization needmoreDM.
Hey, if
it might have been
get them to sign long-term, why not?
It might have been a difference of opinion, though. I think what we were speculating at the time was that... It wasn't at the time the information came out that the whole team wanted to sign as a team, and BZT didn't want that.
I thought that was the Turkish team.
Was that the Turkish team?
That was the Turkish team.
I'm sorry, I'm mixing up them and the Hungarian team.
I think he just jumped the gun on saying that he was leaving the team because he was trialing for other tier 1 teams. And then he didn't actually get picked up by any of them. Yeah. So now he's just...
He actually tweeted that out. I'll put the tweet in here as well so that Kurt can bring it up. But he literally tweeted that he did try out for a few international teams, but the tryouts weren't successful. So he rejoined needmoreDM.
Good player. I mean, I can't remember the last time we saw needmoreDM play a match. Was it 2002? It's been a while.
So it was a while ago. Yeah. Excited to see them perform, but again, need some tournaments. Oh,
that's a cool profile picture. What is that?
Kind of. Yeah.
There it is.
You should go for a similar aesthetic, to be honest, Matt.
Yeah, I think I would look good in anime
this isn't
painting.
even an anime picture,
isn't it? I've been giving Bren advice on his Magic the Gathering as well. He needs to play more lands. So I get.
Oh yeah. I've seen you coming into my streams, and you just spout nonsense, don't you? I mean,
Well, that's all it is when I hear about Magic. It's just nonsense, colors and lands, wizards, all that other bullshit.
Yeah, it makes sense though that you are the owner of a small kind of like showcase dog, because very similar personalities, just very yappy, small, need attention all the time. It makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, takes a lot of grooming in the morning.
I couldn't hear you.
Me. God, these fucking playground comebacks.
What?
Can't hear you.
I didn't hear what you were saying.
Dog, let's move on. NRG are apparently picking up a team, and I saw this announcement. The first thing, yep,
Oh, I
NRG.
missed this.
This went under the radar to a degree here. NRG reportedly signing up a couple of players.
Yeah.
Who are they picking up? Som, I think, is one of the players, right?
It was a report that came out on. Oh damn! I can't even remember the website where it came out on.
Didn't they talk about it on the podcast with Hector and Andy Miller?
I don't know. There was a written report that came out this morning, though, or maybe it was late last night.
This was specifying players in terms of previous histories that they have together. The names escape me.
It was on
Som.
Rush B. It was on Rush B Media by Ryan Friend. He posted a report saying that they're planning to sign Chet Singh, who was previously known as I'm a Pet, as their coach, or at least they're like reaching out to try and sign him, along with Daps and Som.
Those are some two great pickups. I mean, I don't know too much about them in Valorant, obviously, because what do you go off the Twitch clips? But Som, for the past couple years, at least in CS, he was regarded as like a real rising, upcoming NA star. Kind of the classic story, comes from FPL, plays the Pogs, he's sick in those. And I can't remember what the first team he joined was. Maybe it was Envy. But I remember he had started off kind of slow when he first made his entry into the pro scene. People were sort of expecting to see like another Stewie 2K type situation, but he didn't really come in as a real star right away. And it was actually when he started playing with Daps, who Daps is like a renowned, excellent NA IGL. He's constantly putting together these sick teams, and then he gets cut from them because he's not super highly skilled as an individual. It's actually just a tragic story of this guy creating insane teams for orgs and then getting cut. And he actually made the NRG team, but now is joining NRG. So, but it was when Som was playing with Daps that he really started to show that he was as good as the hype that was around him.
It's interesting.
So it's cool to see those two together in Valorant, and it's funny to see them on NRG because Daps put together the NRG team that is now EG with Cirque and Tarek and all those people.
The interesting takeaway here, I think, the news that came as a surprise was Som going over from CS to Valorant, because it appears, at least, I don't follow CS too closely, but it feels like Som was pretty much focused on CS. There was no indication that he was planning on leaving the scene, whereas with Daps, he had made sort of some indications, from the teams he was leaving, that he, was around the possibility that he could have been moving over to Valorant. But it's so interesting that NRG as well, another major org, another player in the esports scene, getting in around this time, and I can tell you right now, God, they must be kicking themselves. They couldn't potentially get Sinatra to move over.
I mean, I don't think so, because like if you look at Andy Miller's kind of comments at the beginning of Valorant, is like he pretty much said they were not interested, and a lot of the reason why was because of the high player salaries, and they weren't sure. And then on the so they didn't announce a roster on the newest podcast with him and Hector, but they did talk about Valorant and just kind of how they both wanted to see the scene play out, and before they kind of got involved with it. And now that they've seen it play out, they kind of see like Wyatt is getting a little bit more hands-on involved. That's when they decided to make this happen. So I think you'll see this. I wonder, they do still have Asu under contract, who he was like he played CS, he played Apex. He doesn't want to be a pro player, but
I don't blame him.
That would be a huge move in terms of like the popularity of the team, because there's so many people out there that just want to see him play. They want to see him play in pro matches and see if he'd be able to still hang at the top level.
And he's under contract with them. So it's like, if he had any inkling of it, also it's like, if you kind of played professionally, like maybe like just at the beginning of the game's life cycle, does that help your kind of stream grow within Valorant and content grow within Valorant?
I mean, it definitely can.
Yeah.
Like kind of give you that extra credibility, like bump.
If he really wanted to, and it played with them as like a fill-in, if they just put together like a loose team for First Strike, they would be immediately one of the most popular teams. You know, they've got 2 players coming over from PS. They've got Asu, who's this enormous streamer. They might not do very well because they've kind of thrown the roster together at the last minute, and maybe people's commitments would be in different places. But they'd immediately be incredibly popular. It would be like a great.
They'd be like one of the most popular teams, like right away.
Yeah.
At the same time,
funny, Matt,
I think
you say that they. Sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
No, go on, Bren.
No, what I was going to say wasn't actually that important.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to counterpoint your thing about them saying, "Yeah, no, we're not too fussed about leaving Sinatra." Like, oh, you fuck. Like, Sinatra is currently, in terms of like his social media following, like that's a guy you want to keep attached to your org for as long as humanly possible.
Yes, but at the time, it was probably Sinatra like, hey, you need to pay me this and then also pay 4 other people this and to coach this. It's like, that's a lot to kind of throw on somebody or an org and the money like straight away when you don't really know what it is. It's like, it's almost like if Sinatra went to them and said, hey, give me like $2 million. Like it's literally the same cost. Like, I don't know.
At the same time, though, they are picking up people who are current CS pros at like a decent level playing for Gen G.
So it has to be somewhat...
it's still going to be fairly expensive. So I find it strange that Andy Miller has been so public about saying that the economics just don't add up. And then a month after, like these very vocal comments, they now believe the economics do add up. And it's okay. Sentinels are apparently a very highly played roster, if you believe the rumors, but a lot of those players were not the same level of Sinatra when they came into the team. It's not like you had to pay them ridiculous money because they are MVP caliber players in another game.
The salaries, though, are directly correlated to like how many teams like at that type of level are opening those spots, right? Like, let's say the players wanted to switch to Valorant, like, and there's not that many high profile teams that can pay even close to like CS salaries, right? Like, you may not have to go into like the rumored areas of like where the Sentinels players and other players are being paid. Like, it's all kind of relative to how many like spots in those primetime orgs are open, right?
I suppose so, yeah. But at the same time, at the beginning of a game, you would expect, I don't know, I feel like at the beginning of a game, you would have expected the salaries to be lower than they are now. It's rare that salaries decrease.
It would typically be lower at the beginning of the game, but you have to remember where this game started. This game did not start at a normal spot. Like, remember the Twitch numbers, like during the beta, and like how ridiculous everything. The numbers were just like mental. That like there was no possible way you could have based like an evaluation off of like what a tournament would do at that time, because you have no idea. I mean, people were doing like 100K viewers on like their own individual stream like, at night. Like, how the fuck? You have no idea what a pro tournament looks like at that point. So I think it kind of needed a bit to come down to earth, or just kind of like go to normal to see like now what an actual salary like is represented in the scene.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, I forgot that the Twitch numbers at the beginning were just
they were absolutely through the roof. I mean, what Summit had like 200K or something like that. Like, I mean, they were like actually just mental.
And that makes perfect sense, because if that was the new normal, if that's what Valorant was really pulling in on a regular basis, you would be justified to pay your players that kind of much, because they'd be getting that many eyes on your.
That's all you knew, because the game went away for a while, right? Like the game, it was like not a long time, but that's all you kind of had the numbers to base it off of. So.
This is also, by the way, NRG signing this kind of team. This is another kind of big tier 1 organization that you could see somebody like WeDid going over to. Like, these are the kind of moves, and this is probably not going to be the last one of a bunch of big organizations. I mean, we were talking about Evil Geniuses earlier as well. These are the kind of moves that are going to be happening, and not just in a normal kind of, some orgs are trickling in one by one. These guys have a deadline. First Strike is having qualifiers in like 3 weeks. So all of these teams are trying to get teams together within 3 weeks on at least short-term contracts. So the moves are going to be thick, fast, and rapid from now on.
That is I don't know how I just totally missed that. That is a great. Sorry, that is a great signing with Daps. I mean, that's a real.
It wasn't on
long-term-
VLR.gg. It's like this was only on. I think it was only just posted on HLTV.
Oh, really?
And it was some other website.
It was 5 hours ago. It was literally posted 5 hours ago.
That's why I missed it. I wasn't around 5 hours ago. But yeah, that is a great signing. Daps is that is a long-term signing, right? That's somebody who will be able to put together a team for you now and adequately adjust the pieces of the team as time goes on.
Yeah, NOORG
that is
looking like a
great signing.
Looking like a major player coming forwards. Well, let's move about how many miles away is Australia? Matt, you should know this. You're Australian.
About 250.
What? I mean, that's not even close to
million.
accurate. Let's talk about the oceanic scene
closer.
because they've had a kind of, I suppose, like a minor tournament, a major tournament, but EXO Clan
It was a
claiming
pretty
the top
major.
spot.
Wasn't it like a 50k tournament?
Was it 50,000? 50
I
big
don't know,
ones?
let me-
No, it was
50
not
Gs? 50
It
bands?
was Ignition Series.
It was big.
It wasn't 50K
Really?
big. I can't remember exactly.
What was the money?
Let me have a look.
Josh,
Where
pull it
was
up.
it? It was the Rise of Valor. It was 11k. Okay, never mind.
Oh, a decent chunk of
Yeah.
change, regardless.
And
Though.
Ignition Series.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not-
only 50 miles away for 50k.
I didn't watch it. I'll be upfront and say that right now. Did any of you guys watch it?
Yeah, I watched
Yeah.
the finals.
Yeah.
yeah.
What was
I
your, what was your
watched-
general
I watched a
impression
bit of the
and
semis
takeaway?
and the final.
People definitely want to. I was reading some of the comments on the previous episode. People definitely want us to talk about the oceanic region a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just because it's a region that we actually haven't touched whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to set out the context of like oceanic and the oceanic region in CS first, because the oceanic region in CS, as far as I'm aware, as somebody that just follows from the outside, they had teams that were reasonably competitive, normally better than the Asian teams, and certain players would get pulled out to play in NA teams because they speak English. So do the NA teams, whereas you can't really do that for the rest of the world. And the scene itself doesn't really have it's got like an artificial ceiling on it because of the ping problems and the fact that you are just literally miles away from everyone else. So why would an organization ever want to sponsor a team in Australia when you have to fly them a bajillion miles to get to any major tournament?
Yes, all the logistical challenges, the fact that their internet is still just copper cabling, it's like they don't have any real up-to-date infrastructure when it comes to the internet, things like that. Other scenes that you could potentially scrim against, you are locked into essentially Australia and New Zealand in terms of your scrim partners because of the ping difference. It's not like Overwatch. In Overwatch is a game where the actual lag compensation is pretty good. You can play on like 120 ping. It won't be fun, but you can play on it, or like 150 ping. You can play on that. So in Overwatch, what you see is a lot of the Australian teams would scrim against Korean teams in Japan, Southeast Asia. There'll be a lot of cross-pollination with that. In games like this, where you need to be playing essentially on, like, even 100 ping is very much pushing it. You need to be on...
no one's going to do that.
But I think in Australia,
Australia's,
you actually, from Perth to Sydney, from that kind of distance, crossing over, you're approaching almost 100 ping. Australia is fucking massive. Like, these are all these limitations that are being set because of the oceanic region. So it is... Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see exactly how far they can come. And the big showcase for me, or the big point of which we're actually paying close attention to the oceanic scene.
This was such a sick play, actually.
Yeah, that's sick.
The big point, the big turning point is going to be when there's these international tournaments, when teams are playing against the other regions. And that is going to be coming from Wyatt, hopefully injecting money into the scene and actually enabling a lot of these top teams to be able to go over and battle against other regions. And that's when you're hopefully going to see them actually go blow to blow, and where you're going to get more eyes on the region as a whole.
Like you mentioned, Australia's internet is so bad. Obviously, my wife's Australian, so she like played games competitively like over there. That the connection from like Sydney or Melbourne or to Perth, like you mentioned, Bren, is so bad that you're just not able to do it. That they would just play on a local like Sydney server, like in the middle, or just try and find a server somewhere in the middle. But everybody's still at like 70, 80 ping.
Yeah,
like playing in your own region, like it's just like.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
Brutal.
The country,
that is absurd.
People don't even people can't imagine how big Australia is because of the what is it, the Mercadia projection of maps?
Yeah,
is that what it's
Mercator
called?
projection.
Where it makes America look like the greatest country in the world. It's like the big blob on a map when you're looking at it. And Australia is this like tiny little thing to the side, and sometimes they don't even include New Zealand on maps. But the point is, what you could actually, I think, Kurt, can you find a picture on Google Images of Australia or of the United States of America inside Australia and how it lines up?
Well, it would be the other way around.
Is it the other way around?
Yeah. Australia is still not as big as the US, but it would take up a large amount of the US.
Bro, find a thing for me. I'm pretty sure. Listen,
my geography knowledge. The majority of the reason that the ping is bad is because of the infrastructure. It's not literally just to do with distance. But anyway, to actually focus it on the Valorant for a second rather than the copper cabling throughout Perth.
Look at this. Look how big this fucking country is. People don't realize, dog.
Yeah, it is. It is enormous. I mean, the USA proper, when you consider the area of it, also includes Alaska, of course. So like it dominates when it comes to like surface area. But when you think about like the mainland area, they're very comparable.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point that I was going to make is when you actually look at the Valorant itself, it was pretty poor in my opinion. And the reason that I brought up the context of where Oceania sits in CS is because I think in Valorant it's going to be very different because the Asian teams at the moment look better than the top Australian teams. When I was watching particularly the final, which I sat down and tried to like really pay attention to between EXO and Team Launch, it seemed very scrimmy. Like it was like watching, it sounds too harsh, but it was like watching a Radiant ranked game. There was a lot of just running around, using abilities at intuitive times, nothing really particularly set up, no set plays between duos, this kind of stuff. All of the kind of development that we've seen in other regions didn't really appear to be quite there in Australia. And so I think it's going to lead to a very different dynamic because if you aren't the best outside of Europe, North America, and Brazil, which as far as I'm aware, Australia is in CS, they're like the fourth region, I suppose. At the moment in Valorant, it seems like they're maybe sixth, maybe like fifth or sixth. That's a very different place in the ecosystem.
I would be interested to see how they go up against most of the Asian teams currently, because I do think that they were showing some impressive gameplay in terms of individual skill. I think, where the problem came in for me, I'm in agreement with you. It was very scrimmy. There was nothing to compare to other regions as set as what we'd see from Vision Strikers in Korea. But at the same time, they weren't playing a particularly aggressive style reminiscent of something we'd see in Latin America, right?
Yeah.
So they're, at the moment, it looked to be they have some skilled players, but they just have not figured out a play style. And the players in the game, the actual synergies between players and using the abilities at proper times, it just was not there.
Yeah, it was very individualistic. There didn't seem to be as much team play as you expect from other regions. And even the very scrappy regions, like you could say NA in the way that they build around their AWPers. You could say Brazil in terms of how they kind of don't really have much set play, but they're all pushing together. There are at least, micro set plays between the players, and they're always looking to trade for each other and help each other and this kind of stuff at the top level. Didn't seem to be there as much.
Breaking news.
Oh, yeah?
There's a tournament on October 3rd.
Really?
What tournament?
The LG face-off matchup. Team XQC versus Team the Tin the Tap Man, Greek God, and Sheik Alive on Valorant.
It's saved!
Is the show over?
What are you talking about?
Wardell is playing in it. Shazam's in it. Sinatra.
Okay, this is my pet peeve actually.
And it'll be on the 3rd.
Really dislike these streamer tournaments. I know why they do them because
I like them.
They do really well and they do well in viewership. But I'm an elitist fuck, so I only want to watch like the pro scene. I want to see storylines continuing from event to event to event. I want to follow some sort of narrative instead of just a streamer A getting paid to play in tournament.
Evidently, it's a promotion for the world's first 4K 1 millisecond response time monitor.
You're buying
4K at 144 hertz.
You're helping the show match marketing here.
Well, maybe they'll let us cast it. Maybe they'll let us cast it.
Yeah.
We tweet them this thing. Yeah.
Dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Brazil.
Paid to promote this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Brazil as our final topic instead of the show match, and that is Fusion Fraggers beating NOORG 2.0 in Brazil once again. What do they say? I mean, the turntables, the table turns.
The tables have turned.
Yeah.
The turn
I
of the
went through-
tables once again.
I went through and I kind of, I mean, this is notable because this NOORG team, NOORG 2.0, was just a mix of some other players that had played for some other teams, and they've only really played this tournament and won before, and they've gone 6-1, beaten Fusion Fraggers, B4.
Oh, was this the
and
best of
Vimdo.
one tournament again?
No, it wasn't.
The
This
early
was
one.
actually like a GSL
This was a
style
legit tournament.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
very
it seems
impressive,
like the
though.
group stages will be 0-1, right? But up until you got to the lower bracket final.
Yeah.
But then it had like semis and grand finals and all that
Pretty
good
sick.
shit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
essentially,
this team is
unknown.
6-1. This brand new team is 6-1 with wins over Fusion Fraggers, B4, and Vimdo, who are like 3 of the top 5 teams. And they have a bunch of, interestingly, Overwatch contenders players from Brazil. I had no idea until some Brazilian people were tweeting at me saying, "Oh, why aren't you talking about the Overwatch contenders players that are currently winning?" And I was like, "Gotta be honest with you, did not know that they were Overwatch contenders players from Brazil because I don't keep up with contenders anymore. I've spent my time watching Valorant instead."
Ole played on, wasn't he on World Cup for Brazil?
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, I would have to double check that, but I think he was. He was the player that rung the most.
Yeah, he was 2018, 2019 Overwatch Brazil. Yeah.
Yeah. They have Sozin as well, who was one of the players, and Muriz. So it's like 3 of the Brazilian World Cup team from 2019 are playing on this NOORG 2.0. And they actually looked like a really good team. I went and I watched the finals just now beforehand. I haven't had a chance to catch up on the semis yet. But Fusion Fraggers have been winning a bunch of tournaments recently. They look like, it's difficult to say one team is the best in the region, but they certainly have a chance to win every tournament that they're in.
Brazil.
And
Go ahead,
NOORG
Josh.
was looking pretty good. Like they could be a rising talent.
It's such an interesting region. You just don't really see this kind of back and forth between different teams. I mean, it's obviously we've talked about this a lot in terms of how disciplined it is on like the evolution of the play in terms of set plays, executes, that sort of thing. It's still getting there comparatively to like EU or NA, but it is the region that is closely behind them. And it's so interesting that you've got so many of these teams that are taking wins just against each other all the time.
I'm getting to the point. I'm not ready to say yet, but I mean, saying that it's behind NA or EU, I don't know.
You think they're comparable on the same level?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think at this point they are. I've seen enough to feel, and I'm not going to say 100% they're comparable, but if they are behind, it is by so little.
Dude, I'm backing you. Man's backing.
What we're seeing in Brazil in terms of the play and some of the individual play, the rifle skill is just fucking unreal. They have unbelievably skilled players. I mean, just on a different like some of the people you can see them, you can just tell by the way that they play a fight out. It's like, oh, like I mean, I literally said this to you verbatim, but for instance, on Game Landers, the one player, John, while we were watching him, I just said to John, I was like, dude, John is different. I mean, there are players in Brazil that the way they play out the fights, their aim, it's just different. Mm-hmm. It's truly
the thing that I love about Brazil. Sorry to cut you off, but the thing that I really like about Brazil is how the pace at which Tens plays Valorant, where he plays really at such a high level, always keeping his opponents on their toes in terms of guessing how he's going to be playing, and he switches it up. He's not really too predictable. God, Brazil kind of feels like every player is trying to imitate that at times.
Yeah.
And
same with Sinatra. It's like that Sinatra thing where they're constantly spamming bullets, trying to get the most value out of everything. They're constantly trying to, move around the map, and they're not playing slow for map control. They're not that strategic or tactical, although they'll still get value out of their utility and try and, push and pull people around the map. But it's more about trying to get the most value you possibly can out of every second that you're alive.
It's so interesting to look at Brazil as a region where none of us were really paying too close of attention to it. In fact, early on in Valorant, we were mainly talking about regions like Korea, right? Because the already pre-established kind of history that Korea has with esports and with League of Legends, especially, and Riot games. we kind of all had our eyes on that region being one to maybe upset and be a dominant force in the overall esports ecosystem. But I am so happy that Brazil has just come out. And honestly, in very similar fashions to how esport games actually kind of rise up in Korea, the same kind of system exists in Brazil, where they have PC cafes, the PC bongs in Korea. Very similar in Brazil. The reason why Rainbow Six is a top esports is because Rainbow Six was free on PC cafes in Brazil. It was like a free-to-play game. They made it free-to-play. They intentionally pushed it super hard marketing-wise. That is the reason why. And if you play your cards right with regions like this, and the fact that it's so closely related to CS, which already has a strong region, like it all just comes together. And you've got this region that, like you're saying, Wyatt, they could be on the same level almost comparatively to NA and EU.
Well, here's an exercise I want us to go through right now.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to take the top, top 10 in NA, and we could even take the old top 10 NA list where maybe you would still have Renegades or Complexity in there. And we're going to take one of the Brazilian teams that we've watched quite a bit, which is Fusion Fraggers, who are certainly, I think you have to put them in like the top 3 Brazil at least, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And they're a pretty consistent team. They have some insane players, Crane, FCKK. All right. So if we go through the list of NA teams in the top 10, and obviously the Pulse Arena happened, so I'm kind of going off an old mental list, but okay, if you compare Fusion Fraggers to Complexity or Renegades, Fusion Fraggers 100%, right? And then
I think so, yeah.
And then if you go to number 8, I'd put T1. I think Fusion Fraggers win that.
Yeah.
Old T1, sure. Yeah,
probably.
And then, who would you have at 7? Then you start getting, it's a bit more interesting. Maybe you have Dignitas there, but it's hard to say with Dignitas' roster.
If we go off the VLR.GG rankings as well, just for an example, here you got Sentinels, TSM, Cloud9, Gen.G, Envy, Immortals. I think the cutoff point would maybe be Immortals, but even then,
Even then,
it's Immortals and Envy before you're even having a discussion about whether the NA teams are better than the top Brazilian teams.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what So when you're saying comparable, it's, right there, and that's just Fusion Fraggers. And it's obviously so up and down. Like Game Landers are still ranked at number 1 on this. Interesting. Yeah. They've just
I think it's just from a lot of their early history, and there's so many tournaments in Brazil all the time that they, you can have these. You can see here from the chart here where the rating system is calculated. You can have these dips, but ultimately, it just is going to be going up.
There are. I actually went through this earlier on because I was interested, because I keep saying to myself, "Oh well, Brazil is just all over the place. Like all of these top teams are beating each other all the time." And so I went through each of the teams and I wrote down their win rates. I wrote down who they actually had wins over and whether they had won tournaments, like their placings in tournaments as well. And to me, there's like 6 teams that clearly step up above the rest when you use this metric of like their win percentage, which big teams they've actually beaten, etc., etc. And you've got, this NOORG 2, who are at the second place there, is a bit of an outlier because they're 6-1 because they're like a brand new team, but they have beaten 3 of the top 5 teams. So that's, they're looking good. But outside of that, it's like Game Landers, Fusion Fraggers, B4, Vimdolol, who are now called like Badorants or something. And then Team 1 are all on a level where if they come into a tournament, they have a chance to be able to win that tournament. And the difference between them is very close, and I think comes down more to like styles and who beats who rather than any large scale differences between the strength of the teams. And that's a real depth when you compare that to something like Korea, for example, with Vision Strikers. Vision Strikers are dominating that region. Yeah, they haven't lost a BO3 in I think since they began, and like Absolute Jupiter are just dominating Japan. The depth is not there in Asia right now, and it doesn't appear to be there anywhere in these other minor regions apart from Brazil, where it is there in buckets and spades.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's a great ending as well to this episode as well, just highlighting a lot of the top play. Brazil set the scene, setting the narratives up as well for the First Strike events as they're occurring across the globe. You never know.
This show needs a Bren's Player of the Week.
We're not up to that point yet. Maybe once we do the rebranding, which we decided on being next week.
Like a Bren's clip of the week. Like
possibly,
maybe a Bren's play of the week.
We might get to that point eventually.
Just search through it.
Maybe. Yes, maybe. We might get to that point.
But you hyped all these people up with more production value.
The trouble is the style of this podcast compared to Plat Chat. It's quite endearing when I come in eating food and just looking like I'm hungover. Yeah. But in this one, I feel like I actually have to put some effort in. So I kind of like I don't
You
know.
don't want to put the effort in to find a play.
Yeah, it's also much
Does it
interesting.
fit the dynamic? Fuck you guys. Anyway,
It's also different to Plat chat as like when we do Plat chat, we usually have like matches that we've been able to see.
Yeah. I mean, this one was very much like theory crafting.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for watching Clutch or Kick episode 12. If you liked it, like, subscribe, read a comment, write a comment, do whatever you want. Honestly, I don't really care as long as it gets the engagement numbers up. And we are going to be going as well, a casual reminder to all of you. This podcast will be moving to a new channel in the near future with a ton more Valorant content that's going to be accompanying it. And we actually are just going to be changing the name as well, just to Plat Chat Valorant, just for consistency's sake. So you've got that to look forward to in the near future. It's been a pleasure recording this podcast. I feel like I have to be very formal now. Suit and tie, everything else. And we'll see you next week.
It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.